I was unable to graduate. Feels good to be a Husky, so thank you.
Did Ron Howard really leave Happy Days because of a big fight? You'll be shocked to find out the real reason why Ron Howard and several of the cast members actually left the show. You see, initially, his departure from the show and that of several cast members was played off as a minor issue, but it turns out that this might have been a lie. A deeper investigation just revealed that while Ron Howard and the show's team made us laugh our hearts out, behind the scenes, it was a completely different experience. One that's very dark and disturbing. But what was the actual problem? What could possibly make the lead actor of such a successful show decide to leave? And who's to blame here? Stick around as we break it down. Very few television shows have the capacity to capture the hearts of millions of people around the world the way that Happy Days did. The show literally had it all: amazing characters, an incredible storyline, and plot twists no one ever saw coming. In fact, it's safe to say that Happy Days truly lived up to its name. The show first aired in 1974, and it was a warm, nostalgic trip back to the 1950s, a time of soda shops, jukeboxes, leather jackets, and simpler times. For over 10 years, the show was a beacon of good vibes, family values, and wholesome comedy. However, unfortunately, it wasn't long before something extremely strange began happening behind the scenes. And as the years rolled on, the Happy Days cast weren't always so happy. Happy Days was majorly about a regular American family, the Cunninghams, and at the very center was Richie Cunningham, played by Ron Howard, the clean-cut, all-American teenager navigating high school, friendships, and young love. His parents, Howard and Marion, were the picture-perfect mom and dad. His best friends, Potsy and Ralph Malph, provided the comic relief. And then, of course, there was him, Arthur Fonzarelli Fonzie, also known as the King of Cool. You see, at first Ron Howard was at the heart of the show. The first 2 seasons were all about him. He was loved by everyone who watched the show. But as time went on, something disturbing began to happen. Everyone began to notice that Howard was gradually slipping away from the spotlight and was almost becoming a supporting character in a series that was once all about him. Of course, the fans were curious, and everyone wondered what had happened. Was it creative differences, or was it something more shocking and complicated? Well, it turns out that Howard's reason for leaving the show had a whole lot to do with what went on behind the lights and cameras. Let's break it down. A shocking rivalry. Like we said before, Happy Days was built around Ron Howard's character, Richie, and his wholesome coming-of-age story. But isn't it somewhat surprising that when you look back at the show, instead of remembering Howard, your mind immediately goes straight to someone else? The character Fonzie, played by none other than the talented Henry Winkler. At first, Fonzie was just a side character hanging out in the background. He was a cool biker and a high school dropout, but he definitely had swagger and charm. Fonzie could make the girls swoon with a single look, fix an engine with a touch, and even get a soda for free, just by pounding the counter. He was just an iconic character all around. Did you know that at first, the network didn't even want him to wear his signature leather jacket because they believed it would make him look like a troublemaker and would scare people from associating with the character? But that didn't happen. Soon enough, everyone fell in love with Fonzie and his role on the show. His catchphrases, "I sit on it," and "Whoa," became so popular that everyone began saying them. Kids wanted to dress like him, talk like him, and, in fact, be him. Fonzie literally stole the show. Whenever he was on screen, he stole the scene, and soon enough, fan mail started pouring in, not for Richie, who was supposed to be the star of the show, but for Fonzie. He wasn't just in a supporting role anymore, he had become the king of Happy Days. Of course, the network executives noticed, and slowly, the show began shifting its focus. The writers leaned into the rave surrounding him, and they began giving him longer lines, bigger storylines, and more screen time. They even went as far as making him almost superhuman at times. They also gave him a deeper emotional side to complement his cool character. And so he wasn't just a tough guy anymore, he had heart. He became a big brother figure who would protect his friends and loved ones at any cost. And so, when Season 3 of the show rolled around, Fonzie had moved into the Cunningham family's garage apartment, solidifying his role in Richie's life and in the show. But how exactly did Ron Howard feel about this development? Would you be surprised if he started to feel like a supporting character in his own show? Apparently, things were still manageable for Howard until something unfortunate happened, a moment that changed everything for the show. Happy Days was moved to a new time slot up against some tough competition. Unsurprisingly, the show's ratings began to fall gradually, and of course, the network panicked. And to salvage the situation, they came up with a solution. They decided to put Fonzie front and center. They probably thought if fans loved him that much, making the show all about him would make them want to stick around, right? They even changed the opening credits, making sure that Henry Winkler got top billing alongside Howard. Unfortunately, Ron Howard wasn't having it one bit. He had signed on to be the lead, but now he was sharing and even losing the spotlight to Henry Winkler. And although he remained a key part of the show, the sad truth was that Happy Days had become The Fonzie Show. As you can already imagine, this generated into something much deeper and complicated between Howard and Winkler. Sources revealed that an unhealthy rivalry began brewing between the two, one that would go on to change the very dynamics of the show. Apparently, things got so bad that one time, Howard even threatened to leave the show because he felt insulted with the way things were going. Howard said that the show's producers once approached him with the idea of changing the title of the show from Happy Days to Fonzie's Happy Days, and he was completely livid. He immediately told the producers that he would leave the show even though he was still obligated to continue filming the show due to his contract. In an interview with the New York Times, he said, "I told them, if you really want to change the name of the show to that, I would rather go back to the university and film school and what I was doing before the show launched." That's not all. Howard actually confessed that he felt that he was treated with disrespect on the show when Winkler's character became more popular than his. He said that as Winkler grew more and more popular, the show's executives, studio heads, and network heads changed their attitude toward him. He said, "When we would go out of the road to promote the show, it was just insane, focused on Fonzie. Clearly, that was very exciting. Also, the executives, studio heads, and network heads, started treating me with a lot of disrespect from a business standpoint and in terms of interaction." To make matters worse, the media refused to stay quiet. They kept asking him questions about how he must have felt becoming a second-hand citizen on his own show. And Howard didn't have an answer to these questions. You're probably wondering how Winkler reacted to all this. Well, he told the New York Times that he actually rejected the idea of the show being renamed after him, mostly because he knew it would hurt Howard and the other cast members. He told the producers, "If you do that, it is an insult to everybody I'm working with. Why fix something that isn't broken? We are really good. I live in the family, and that's why I'm successful. I'm asking you, if you never listen to me again, leave it alone. While some media sources kept trying to play off the very obvious beef between Howard and Winkler as speculations, Winkler confirmed that indeed the rumors were true and that his relationship with Howard on the show had almost gone sour. In an interview, Winkler opened up about how his rise to popularity tested his friendship with Howard and how he tried to manage the situation and stop it from completely escalating. He said, "I was very aware never to be less than respectful to him. I was always careful never to flaunt anything that was happening to me on the soundstage in front of the cast members, including him. I was lucky that my character's popularity was happening, but I was a member of an ensemble, which was higher than bragging." Winkler also confessed that he learned a lot from working alongside Howard, and he didn't want to throw all that away for the fame he was getting at the time. Recalling their time on set together in an interview, Winkler said, "Howard was completely grounded by his parents, who never allowed any bad behavior. He was a professional. This was his job, and I learned from watching him. Although I'm older, and I already had the experience of theater and commercials on the East Coast on how to be a professional, I still had a lot to learn from him." He continued, "I remember one time I got overly emotional trying to memorize my lines. It was Howard who took me back to the soundstage and said, 'If I were you, I probably wouldn't hit my script.' I said to him, 'Ron, I'll never hit my script as long as I live,' and I never did." But Winkler wasn't entirely innocent. At some point, the fame began to get to him, and it did something to his ego. He recalled a particular time when he stepped out of line and was a bit mean to some cast members, and how the show's creator, Gary Marshall, put him in his place. He said, "One time when Gary was announcing the guest cast, I said, 'Gary, we have to hurry up because I'm flying to Arkansas.' Gary nodded, put down the microphone, grabbed me by my shirt, put me against the wall and said, 'Don't ever do that again because they have every right to be recognized like you.' He kept us in line." So it's not surprising if this ego may have affected his friendship with Howard in some way. Well, the good news is that both men were able to patch things up real good and become really close friends eventually. As a matter of fact, Howard says Winkler is the godfather to all 4 of his children. But while most people think this insane rivalry and the way he was sidelined by the show's producers were the major reasons why Ron Howard left the show, it turns out that it was not. When he eventually left the show just before the start of its 8th season in 1980, it was for a completely different reason, one that caught everyone by surprise. Major reason for Ron Howard's departure. Well, it turns out that Howard actually left the show to chase his lifelong dream of becoming a director. Amazing, right? He didn't just want to act in stories, he wanted to tell them. He wanted to sit in the director's chair, call the shots, and bring his own visions to life. And while on the set of Happy Days, that dream was calling out to him louder than ever. You see, Ron Howard was practically born in front of the camera. As a kid, he was already a television star, playing Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. Millions of Americans watched him grow up on their screens. But even back then, Howard wasn't just interested in acting. He was fascinated by everything happening behind the scenes. He'd watch the cameras, study the directors, and ask questions about how movies were made. In an interview with the Associated Press, Howard spoke publicly about his desire to direct. He said, "I guess I've thought about directing since I was 8 or 9 years old. I was asked what I wanted to be, and I said, an actor, writer, producer, director, cameraman." But by the time Happy Days came along in '74, Howard was no longer a kid, but he was still a star. This may come as a surprise, but do you know that the main reason Howard even joined the show in the first place was just so he could escape being drafted into military service during the Vietnam War? Well, now you know. At the time, people could get drafted to enlist in the military. But college students had deferments. Howard was attending the University of Southern California's film school, but his grades put him at risk of losing his deferment. This meant that accepting the role of Richie Cunningham would provide him with steady employment, which could help him avoid the draft while continuing his acting career. Well, his number was never picked, and the draft ended just a few months later. But Happy Days well outlasted it, running for 11 years and spinning off several successful sitcoms and stars. Even as Happy Days reached the peak of its popularity, Howard's mind was elsewhere. He was busy dreaming about what it would be like to make his own movies, and so he started experimenting with directing and making small projects on the side. But there was a problem. Hollywood didn't take him seriously. To the world, Ron Howard was just a sitcom star. A nice guy, sure. A talented actor, definitely. But a director? Well, no one believed he could make the leap, and that made him even more determined to prove them wrong. By 1980, Howard knew it was time. If he wanted to be a director, he had to fully commit, and that meant leaving Happy Days behind. So, in Season 7, Howard said a very difficult goodbye to Happy Days, the show that had catapulted him to the limelight. In the show, his character Richie was written off by having him move to California to join the Army. When he left the show, rumors and speculations began to circulate, with many fans wondering why he made the decision. Some said it probably had something to do with the way he was treated by the show's producers in the later seasons, while some argued that it was probably because he wasn't allowed to direct an episode of the show. But Ron Howard made it clear that his reason for leaving was because he was interested in pursuing a new path. As you can already imagine, walking away from a hit television show like Happy Days was beyond risky, and Howard was well aware of this fact. At first, it was tough, but then, in 1984, he got his big break. Howard directed a little movie called Splash, a romantic comedy about a man who falls in love with a mermaid, and it was a massive hit. It turns out that Howard probably made the right call, because today he has so many accolades for his directing career. Howard has won an Academy Award for Best Director. He has a Golden Globe Award to his name, an Emmy, and several other notable awards. But while we celebrate Ron Howard and his beautiful work on Happy Days, we can't help but wonder what happened to the other cast members who also left the show. Yes, it wasn't just Howard. Apparently, some other cast members had some issues on the show that required them to say their goodbyes. Other cast members' reasons for leaving. Let's start with Don Most, who played the role of Ralph Malph. Ralph was Richie's funny friend, known for his jokes and antics. However, after 7 seasons, just like Howard, Don Most decided to explore other acting opportunities, and he left the show. Sadly, the character of Ralph was written out by having him pursue his dreams away from Milwaukee. However, Don Most returned for guest spots in the final season. Next up are Gavan O'Herlihy and Randolph Roberts, and they played the role of Chuck Cunningham. Chuck, the eldest Cunningham sibling, appeared in the early seasons of the show, but then he vanished without explanation. This disappearance led to the term Chuck Cunningham syndrome, which describes television characters who disappear without mention. Well, what really happened was that Gavan O'Herlihy, the original actor, left the show to pursue other roles, and Randolph Roberts briefly replaced him. Eventually, the character was dropped, and the show continued without acknowledging Chuck's existence. While some of these actors parted ways with the show amicably, the same cannot be said about Roz Kelly, who played the role of Pinky Tuscadero. Roz joined the show in the 4th season. However, despite being so popular, Her time on the show was short-lived, and rumors had it that off-screen disagreements led to her character's quick exit. That's not all. Do you remember the character Arnold Takahashi, played by the iconic Pat Morita? Arnold was the cheerful owner of Arnold's Drive-In, and he was an absolute fan favorite. Pat Morita left the show to star in his own series, Mr. T and Tina, and his character was written out by selling the drive-in. However, after his spin-off ended, Morita surprisingly returned to Happy Days, and Arnold reclaimed his role as the beloved restaurant owner. Well, at the end of the day, you can agree with me that Happy Days remains one of the greatest sitcoms in television history. But what do you think? Did the producers of Happy Days treat Ron Howard fairly, and did he make the right choice by leaving? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.